Hi, my name is Alizee Zimmermann. I work with the Turks and Caicos Reef Fund. We're an NGO whose primary focus is on helping preserve and protect the environment of the Turks and Caicos through education, outreach, and advocacy. At any given moment, we have several projects going on, but recently our focus has really been turned towards the battle against stony coral tissue loss disease, which first appeared in our waters in early 2019. Since lockdown this year, we decided to use the time to create an online observer training workshop that local volunteers could use to learn about the identification of our specific susceptible species, as well as how to differentiate the disease from others and how to help us in the monitoring effort. So this workshop is a recording of those sessions. So let's get to it. So I would like to start with acknowledgements. So this observer training was very heavily adapted from an SCTLD observer training program that was created jointly by the University of Florida IFAS Extension, as well as Florida Sea Grant. And they have very kindly allowed us to use their slides and their information, which we received at the MPA Connect meeting in Key West last August. And these intellectual resources are invaluable. On that same thread, Andy Bruckner's diagnostic differentiation slides play heavily into that section of this observer training. So I would also like to thank him for allowing us to use those. And last but not least, Judith Lang and Agra, a very heartfelt thank you to the countless hours and hundreds of communications and emails that have gone back and forth between us, and their continued support of our efforts, as well as helping with the information, data, photographs, and of course the slides that you're going to see momentarily. And very quickly, I'd like to say that the new SCTLD dashboard created by AGRA is an absolutely phenomenal resource. I will be popping into that at some point on this during this observer training, but please, if you want to get all the information about SCTLD, where it's been, what's happening in one place, that is the place to get it. So I really highly do recommend it. So let's get started. Okay, so today throughout this training program, we are going to go through 3 specific sections. The first section is all about coral identification, the 14 most susceptible species found here in the Turks and Caicos and the broader region, and how to identify them, little hints and tricks, as well as differentiating features. Our second section will be all about diagnostic differentiation, determining whether it is in fact stony coral tissue loss disease that you're observing, or could it perhaps be something else. And then our third section will be about monitoring, the monitoring efforts that are currently being done. For example, roving diver surveys, which are a way for citizen scientists who engage in observer training such as this one, are then able to go out and collect meaningful data on the reefs. And of course, there will be some take-home information for you. So please look in the video descriptions for the links. You will find there AGRA's SCTLD susceptible coral ID slides, which are an amazing resource for learning those 14 species, Andy Bruckner's SCTLD ID presentation on diagnostic differentiation, and copies, Excel sheets of the roving diver surveys that you can then have printed in your local town, and also use the digital version for recording those surveys. Also, please do feel free to email me at alizee@tcreef.org and keep the conversation going. It has been incredible to see the collaboration and the increase in sharing of resources and communication that's been happening across the region since stony coral tissue loss disease. And it really does emphasize what an important and not localized problem it now is. So let's have a look at where it started and kind of how it's been moving around. So in 2014, the first outbreak was seen around Miami-Dade County during routine monitoring. And within a year, it had gone up through Broward County and already down through the Biscayne National Park. By 2016, we see it going up towards Palm Beach and it just reaching into Martin County. and it's now made its way into the Florida Keys, into the upper Keys. By 2017, it has reached as far north as it is going to the edge of the Florida Reef Tract in Martin County, and it's down into the upper middle Keys, where it then continues on through 2018 until it finds itself at the end of 2018 into the lower Keys, and by 2019, it has reached Key West. In the meantime, we are seeing it now kind of spread all over the Caribbean region. Here, I have just pulled up that amazing AGRA data dashboard, that I mentioned, and I just wanted to show you here how phenomenal this resource really is, and also give a chronology as to when different islands in the region began to observe SCTLD. So in 2018, we can see that Jamaica, Mexico, and San Martin have started to observe tissue loss disease there. By 2019, we're seeing it in St. Thomas, the Dominican Republic, the Turks and Caicos Islands, Belize, St. Eustatius, Puerto Rico, and by the end of 2019 in the Bahamas as well. And most recently, the British Virgin Islands have been added as one of the dots on this map. So you can see that this really is a regional problem, and the spread of this disease is jumping and going much quicker. From 2014 to 2018, there was very little movement outside of the Florida Reef Tract, and then all of a sudden we're seeing it popping up all over the region, as far south as Belize and the BVIs. Another great thing about this dashboard is that it gives you a lot of information as to what's happening around as well. So I think that's a great thing to do. So I'm just going to pop right back to our presentation here, which has a much less sophisticated version of that map and just shows where to date SCTLD has been observed. I don't think that I need to preach the value of a reef tract to anybody watching these observer training videos, but it is important to note that not only are they incredibly valuable ecologically and environmentally, but often with policymakers and with pushing things to happen, it helps to view it in an economic setting as well. And the numbers here speak for themselves as far as to the value, economic value of a reef tract. I know that in the Turks and Caicos, it perhaps does not quite match these numbers, but relative to our population and our economy as a whole, I think it probably outweighs them as far as how important it is to the local economy and stakeholders. This is very quickly just to show you that disease responses are always multifaceted efforts. And so this is a quick example of all the different companies that have been assisting us in the Turks and Caicos to make our intervention and monitoring efforts possible. So why have this observer training? This is the reason. We need eyes on the water. At the end of the day, most of the researchers and scientists and policymakers and lawmakers and government officials are not in the water. They're in the offices or in the laboratories. So having trained dive professionals or citizen scientists that have a stakehold in the local environment can really lead to a large amount of valuable data being collected. And we are seeing that firsthand here in the Turks and Caicos, that through these observer training programs, we've been able to widely increase our monitoring efforts and really collect a lot of valuable data. Also, I would like to point out that it's very important to not only monitor areas and report presence or progression of disease, but also perhaps any recovery, and especially reports of no disease are just as important. Because, for example, if we know that SCTLD has arrived in a certain region, so the Turks and Caicos as an example, but it has not yet been seen on the reefs of East Caicos, well, that is very important data to us because we know that East Caicos has a high population of these susceptible species. So it makes that area more valuable as far as monitoring and trying to get a little bit ahead of the curve. So reports of no disease really are just as important. As is photography, if you can do it. So here is a photo that I took last year of a ridged cactus coral, Mycetophilia lamarckiana. And it really is just to show you the power of photography to corroborate your story and to help understand. So this species was not mentioned in the original DAC document, probably because it's now quite uncommon in Florida. But here's the thing is countries across the Caribbean, such as the TCI, now have an opportunity to fill in gaps in Florida's data because we have varying species and varying abundance of those species. So please keep in mind, if you have access to a camera or a GoPro, take photos. They are concrete evidence, especially when you're starting to learn. It will really help you to go back and look at those photos. And also you'll be asked to send them with any data that you send just to corroborate what you're seeing there. This is especially important in areas where SCTLD is also just first arriving, or perhaps hasn't even been confirmed yet. An example of how to take photos. So I will admit this photo right here is very typical of an obsession that came upon me with taking those very zoomed in macro shots where you're able to really see that progression line and the healthy versus denuded skeleton. And as wonderful as this photo might be, it is not as useful in the long term when we want to look at how an entire reef area might be changing. So that's why it would be more recommended, if you can, to please try and take a few further out so you get a scene like this. And then I might say, okay, well, something's not looking quite right in this bottom right corner here. I see some white. So then I'm going to get in a little bit closer, take another shot, and then that's when I can, if you have a camera with macro flash, which most little point and shoots do, but GoPros don't, then you can come in a little bit closer, and that's when you can really get these very crisp images of the disease lesions. So one more time, try to, if possible, now not for every colony, of course, but try to take a couple or a few wider angled shots where you can still at the very least see clearly the bottom composition. So how far away you can get, of course, depends on the clarity of the water that day in that area. But you get your wider angle, you get your intermediate angle, and then you get your lovely close up here that really shows the demarcation of the disease lesion. So in our next episode, we're gonna go straight into corals and the disease outbreak. We're gonna look at the 14 susceptible species, or most common of the susceptible species, at least for the Turks and Caicos region, as well as how stony coral tissue loss disease affects these corals and what you should be looking for when you're out in the field doing monitoring. So I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you very shortly.